Welcome to the City of Bakersfield Planning Commission meeting. This television broadcast is brought to you by the local cable companies, the County of Kern, and the City of Bakersfield. You can watch the rebroadcast of this meeting Saturday at 7 p.m. and Sunday at 10 a.m. The agenda for this meeting can be downloaded at www.bakersfieldcity.us. Presiding over this evening's meeting, Chair Daniel Cater.
Good evening. It is my pleasure to call to order the June 16th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chair Cater.
Here.
Vice Chair Bashertash. Commissioner Biddle. Commissioner Coman.
Here.
Commissioner Lomas.
Here.
Commissioner Neal.
Here.
Commissioner Wade.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for attending tonight's Planning Commission meeting. This commission provides an opportunity for public participation in the development process throughout the City of Bakersfield. The Planning Commission considers a wide variety of projects, including subdivision maps, zone changes, general plan amendments, and much more. When applications are received, the City Planning Division analyzes the request. Planning staff will present the facts about the project along with their recommendation to the Commission, who will approve an item or make a recommendation as appropriate. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Agenda item 3, public statements. Agenda item public statements.
Thank you. Does anyone in the audience wish to address the Commission regarding items listed on tonight's agenda? Seeing no speakers for public comments on tonight's agenda, does anyone in the audience wish to address the Commission regarding items not listed on tonight's agenda? If so, please come forward and state your name. Seeing none, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Agenda item 4, consent calendar items.
All matters listed under the consent items do not require a public hearing and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no discussion of said items unless staff or a commissioner requests specific items be discussed and or removed for separate action. May I get a motion approving the consent items? Commissioner Coleman?
Oh, I'd like to make a motion to approve item 4A, please.
May I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Lomas. Commissioners, please cast your votes.
Motion passes with Commissioner Bashertash, Wade, and Biddle absent.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Agenda item 5, consent public hearings.
Now is the time for consent public hearings. Please note, if the item is not removed by commissioner, staff, or member of the public, the commission will vote on all items in one motion without further comment. If an item is removed, it will be placed at the end of the non-consent public hearing items. At this time, I will open all of the consent public hearing items 5A through 5D. Does any member of the public wish to remove a consent public hearing item? Seeing no members of the audience, does any commissioner or staff wish to remove a consent public hearing item?
Mr. Chairman, I do not wish to remove an item. However, I do note that on items 5B and C, I will abstain.
Thank you, Commissioner Neal.
Chair Cater, if I may, there was a memo random prepared for item 5D that was transmitted to your commission, clarifying a condition of approval. The applicant is in the audience and concurs with that change.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Okay. Seeing no additional speakers and no additional commissioner or staff comments, at this time, the consent public hearing items not removed, which are All items on tonight's agenda, 5A through D, are now closed. May I get a motion to adopt staff's recommendation on the consent public hearing items not removed, incorporating all staff memorandum and revised staff recommendations, with Commissioner Neal abstaining on vote on items 5B and C, and incorporating the staff memorandum presented to the commission on item 5D. And please repeat all of that when you make your motion.
I'll just say, I'll make that
All right,
motion.
Commissioner Lummis, may I have a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Coman. Commissioners, please cast your votes.
Motion passes with Commissioners Basher Tash, Wade, and Biddle absent, and with Commissioner Neal abstaining from 5B and 5C.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question in order? Does that, do we have a quorum issue here this afternoon, so how does that affect our quorum?
We have quorum, Commissioner Coleman. We have 4 commissioners. So
But
as long
only
as
3 are able to vote on.
as long
two
as
of
it's
the
a
issues.
majority, it's a 50 plus 1 of the
Okay.
4 people that are here.
Okay.
The item passes. So we needed 3 people to vote in favor, and we do have that.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
I apologize for the interruption.
Oh, appreciate the clarification. Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Agenda item 6, non-consent public hearings. Or sorry, there are no non-consent public hearing items.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Agenda item 7, workshops.
So you know how to clear a room still.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Coleman.
Great way to start a presentation. Yeah.
It's a pleasure, Chair Cater. Commissioners, it's a pleasure to be presenting to you this evening. Pleasure to meet you, Commissioner Neal. And you know, it's always great when I can come back to the Planning Commission and spend some time. And tonight's time will be spent on a short presentation on pro-housing policies and designation. It's a follow-up. I just gave a recent, maybe perhaps more abridged presentation at the Planning and Development Committee of the City Council. And in light of that, Director Johnson felt it might be beneficial to bring this information to the Commission for your digestion. I'll be quick because there's just a packed house and I don't want to keep anybody waiting. A little bit about pro-housing policy, bit of background. It was originally adopted as part of AB 1029, and that was part of the legislative session of 2021. And actually, it's already been amended this year to add another potential incentive to being a pro-housing city. But it's the intent of the state to create incentives for jurisdictions, and the highlighted sections, you might find them easier to digest from your slide deck, but the highlighted sections call out some of those things, TCC, affordable housing, sustainable community grants. So you can get additional points if you are a pro-housing designated city in those competitive grant applications. So, maybe the mystery is those other items that will come up over time. But right now, there are 4 specific items that would be indicative of having an advantage if you are a pro-housing city. And so part of this too is to provide that incentive for providing pro-housing types of things, and we'll talk about what they are. And they're a mixture of things because, as noted, the criteria considers the needs of
rural and suburban and urban communities, and each of those cities, their pro-housing needs can be, or the things they can do to promote housing may be very different from one community to another. Hence, there's many different types of things that amount to pro-housing. So AB 2029 listed 10 specific examples of pro-housing strategy, everything from reduced parking requirements to affordable housing trust funds, objective development standards, reduction in permit processing time, and the like. And all of those things are called out per the ordinance. And HCD was tasked with creating an application where those regulations could be implemented by the law. HCD came out with their application form in July of last year, and the only city so far to have become a pro-housing city with a pro-housing designation has been Sacramento. I think it's important to note, though, that Sacramento, many of these things that as we move through our 6-cycle housing element, may be attainable through that housing element effort. And it's important to note that Sacramento has completed their 6-cycle housing element and subsequently made a successful application. Let's look at what the application looks like. In order for a municipality to satisfy the thresholds necessary to apply, there are 4 things. The applicant has an adopted compliant housing element. The city currently has an adopted and compliant housing element. We have no correction letters on file from HCD. It's a good thing. And we also must have submitted a legally sufficient annual progress report, and the city submits their annual progress reports. This body was provided a PowerPoint presentation speaking to the findings of that annual report, which provided for a public comment as a component of that. I think there was a similar audience on that particular event. I don't know if there's a trend with me or otherwise, but we do that annually as per required by law and submit by April 1st. The applicant must have completed on or before the deadline any rezone program to satisfy RHNA. That's specific to our 5th cycle housing element, and our 5th cycle housing element was adopted, and no rezone was required in no small part because there was a significant overage of parcels included in our 5th cycle housing element as part of our vacant sites inventory. And the applicant must be in compliance at the time of application with other applicable state housing law. I think when I gave my presentation to you in late March, there were something like 77 laws that were housing related and that had been adopted by Sacramento since 2017, so in the last 5 years. And the city isn't in full compliance with those laws at this time, but we will be in compliance with those laws at time of our adoption of housing element in December. Some of those take meaningful action on our parts. Other can be very simple. Others are simple acknowledgments. There are 4 scoring categories in the application, and one must have scored 30 points or more to provide for a successful application. So there are 60 points available. You must score at least half of them to be considered a successful application for a pro-housing designation. They're broken into 4 categories, and let's just go through those 4 categories. I've highlighted some star components, and some of those things are to talk about things we have done. Some of those things we'll talk about what we are doing, and some of those things we'll talk about why we're not doing this as opposed to that, as it relates to looking at how we might secure a pro-housing designation. So category 1 is favorable zoning and land use. You can see the first one would be I can have 3 points if I provide sufficient sites, including that rezoning. That the city will entertain a rezoning as part of our housing element this year. We will need to in order to secure the minimum number of vacant sites and provide consistency with the regional housing need allocation that was recently released by Kern Cog. So this particular 3 points, or 10% of a successful application, would mean that we would have sufficient sites to accommodate 150% or greater of our current or draft RENA by total income or category. And I put a star around number with the 2.1, which is if I was able to accommodate even 125 to 149% of that RENA, I would satisfy those 2 points. Currently, the city isn't looking to provide for 125 or more of their current RENA allocation. Our allocations are in total 37,461 units, and roughly half of that, about 48% of it, is assigned to low and very low income categories. It'll be a significant challenge for the city to build what I think, if my brain is working on a Thursday evening, something like 2,800 plus low and very low income units annually over that 8-year term. And when you think about that, if an average low income housing unit requires $250,000 to $300,000 to build, I mean, you multiply that by 2,800 plus units, well, there's a lot of zeros attached to that, something like $500+ million annually and almost $5 billion over an 8-year term. And since we've been championing the fact that we've been able to construct close to 300 units a year for the last 2 or 3 years, and that's been a tremendous accomplishment compared to where we had been in the first 5 years of our current 5th cycle. To contemplate building 2,800 units, that's going to be a really tough accomplishment. And consequently, the city isn't looking to provide for more than, right now our target is to have about 110 to 115% of our RENA allocation identified within our vacant sites inventory. So that's an example of where perhaps shooting for 150% or more is counterproductive based on the numbers that were assigned to produce in our 6th cycle. Here's some more in category 1, 2 points, reducing or eliminating parking requirements. Well, I think the city is doing great things in terms of looking to reduce parking requirements. We have parking reduction standards in our downtown, and by and large, we have a very positive parking counts compared to our comparable cities. So how we codify that or expand upon that in terms of a parking program, we'll look hard at that. Council certainly wants us to put some emphasis into bringing forward a comprehensive parking plan that would, I think, provide for us those points. Number G, zoning to allow residential or mixed uses in 1 or more non-residential zones. We do that right now. You can build multifamily in our CC, our CB zones, our downtown zones, as well as our many of our commercial zones with the benefit of a use permit. And so consequently, that's something we do already. And then the last one, H, modification or development standards provide for a greater development intensity, and potential areas of focus include floor area ratios, height limits, and the like. We have a referral from a council member right now asking for us to explore options to floor area ratios. We'll bring a report to the Planning and Development Committee that perhaps is the foundational piece in looking to amend our ordinance to provide for a different approach that promotes development intensity that's perhaps different than the application of a floor area ratio. The second category is acceleration of housing production timeframes. 2 points, establish a streamlined program level, CEQA analysis, certification of general plans, company EIRs. I think the full comment says something like certification of general plans, specific plan, community plans, and the like. And we really feel that with the completion of our general plan and a company EIR, program level EIR, that many projects will be able to qualify for a streamlined program level CEQA analysis. Whereas right now with an older EIR and an older general plan, and in some cases, properties that are no longer the original general plan designation that was in place when that general plan was adopted, that there are times we can use that approach, but there are as many times when we feel that we're not fully satisfying CEQA in that approach. So I'm excited about having a fresh EIR from our general plan, with a fresh general plan to begin to implement development of that plan using that EIR liberally. Number 2, documented practice streamlining housing development at project level, such as enabling by right approval and processes. I put a star in this one because this is one of those cases where the city has to make policy, the council has to make policy decisions as it relates to how much lack of discretion is good discretion. Let's put it that way. Many of the policies here in the land use component, talk about by right or ministerial permitting and the like. And there certainly is a place for ministerial permitting. But by the same token, there are projects that really need discretionary approval from this body, the city council, and the like. And so the city will, through its general plan, I believe, have policies in place that help guide us through a revised use schedule towards considering streamlined processes and applying them where it makes good sense, and applying discretionary processes where it additionally makes just as much good sense. Category 2, again, 1 point, absence or elimination or replacement of subjective development standards. We've taken a report to the Planning and Development Committee of the Council on objective development standards versus subjective development standards. I think we'll at least propose some objective development standards as part of our updated rezoning for residential development, and let the council digest what that looks like. So that's one of these new policies that have come through one of those laws that the city needs to digest, contemplate, and take advantage of it if it's of merit. 1 point for the establishment of one-stop permitting processes or a single point of contact. And the city is, I'll let the cat out of the bag, the city is actually live right now on over-the-counter permitting through our new online electronic permitting and plan checking software. And we're getting close to the user group trainings that will accompany going fully live. And we should be live on August 1st with all of the tools of the online plan check and permitting application that we're going live with. And that takes a big step towards being one-stop shop, where at least digitally, every one of the departments in the city will be able to touch plans, comment on plans, and the like. We're excited that we're moving at least toward that. Whether there's a single point of contact from application to occupancy, that's a heavy lift for any municipality to entertain. I did it in my last municipality, but it was a much smaller community with a much smaller volume of applications. So consequently, we have to gauge whether that works in a city of 400,000. Category 3, 3 points, waiver, a significant reduction of development impact fees for residential development. The Economic and Community Development Department right now is looking at a impact fee, developer impact fee incentive program, and what that might look like. It's always, you always have to measure impact fee, because impact fees are there for the development community to offset the cost of that development and maintenance of infrastructure. And if it's not sufficiently offset, then that cost is shifted to a ratepayer. There's only two ways to do that, development community or ratepayer. But we're in a situation where we're going to look hard at ways to incentivize certain development. And one of those ways might be through development impact fee reduction. Last category, category 4, providing financial subsidies. Establish a local housing trust fund. We have an affordable housing trust fund stood up in the fair city of Bakersfield. And through ANOFA processes, people can make application and compete for funding through that Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So we have those 2 points available to us if we were to make an application. Prioritization of local general funds for affordable housing. I think that goes kind of hand in hand with the first one. We, with our Measure N funds and the goals within the PSVS program, providing additional affordable housing is something the city has prioritized. So what are the conclusions? Well, the short answer is the city can't make an application right now. We don't satisfy the thresholds to make application, but we'll be fully compliant with all housing HCD law when we adopt our housing element update, and that'll occur somewhere shy of December of 2023. And from my perspective, that's a blink of an eye. I know things are happening rapidly and fast in development services, and really, maybe it's 2 blinks. I don't know, but before you know it, there'll be a housing element, on your dais for you to take positive action on in advance of the city council. And with that, we should find ourselves fully compliant with housing law, so that HCD is fully happy with us in their adoption of that and certification of our 6-cycle housing element. In the meantime, I think decision makers will weigh the net benefits of the individual points and the net benefits of actually application for a pro-housing designation. And I wouldn't be surprised if ultimately we took positive steps towards making an application shortly thereafter adoption of the housing element. That concludes my presentation. I want to thank the audience for their patience, for the Commission for their patience, and I'd be happy to answer questions you might have.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any commissioner questions or comments? Commissioner Coleman, start us off.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. Appreciate you coming down here as always, and we always learn a lot from you, so thank you. You mentioned that you're working on this process, and the city of Sacramento has completed all this already. So where do you think we are in comparison to other comparable communities in California as far as being compliant? Are we with the pack? Are we behind the pack? What do you think?
I think there's something to be said that only cities that have a completed 6-cycle housing element are going to really qualify for application because of the girth of law that's out there. There's just a lot of housing law that has come down the pike under the guise of housing accountability acts or housing crisis acts or any one of a number of catchy phrases attached to Sacramento law. So in terms of where I feel the city is at, and I'll be honest, I didn't go through the individual points and say, oh, wow, we've got 28. We're just 2 points shy. In no small part because I couldn't make an application if I wanted to, but another reason would be that I'm not sure, how do I want to put this? I'm not sure of net benefit. You will have to report to HCD annually to maintain your pro-housing designation. And I'm not sure of what the reporting requirements of that look like, and I'm not able to compare those with the net benefits of the program. Of course, I'm going to take direction from decision makers as to whether there's a desire to make that application. But at present, I think to be more direct to your question, I think that the city has done many things that other cities have not done in terms of being responsive to providing streamlined processes, affordable housing opportunities and the likes, and some of those things directly target points that are available through this program. Whether an application is made or not, I think that we'll cross that bridge after we adopt our housing element.
All right. You said that when you were talking about category 1, the favorable zoning and land use, and you were talking about item number C, the 2 points for sufficient sites, including rezoning to accommodate 125 to 149% of the RENA. You indicated that it was decided that we weren't going to be able to do that. And who were you talking about? Was that the development committee of the city council, or the city council, or was that the city manager's office deciding that?
Well, can I ask you to just be a little more specific with the question?
Well, you said we're not going to be able to do that, or not able to do that.
Right.
You implied that somebody's already decided that, and I just want to know who was that decided
Thanks for the clarification. In the past, there were no strings attached to placing a site into a vacant site inventory as part of your regional housing need allocation. Consequently, in the 2015 RENA, our regional housing need allocation, and the supporting vacant sites inventory that demonstrated we had all the sites necessary to meet our regional housing need allocation, we had something like 280% of our required units, because we essentially counted every single vacant site in the city. There weren't any parameters attached to aside from zoning, to being a moderate income, a very low, or a low income unit. HCD looked at those based on density, and so if you're an R4 zone, that would be perceived to be, because density is higher, that would be perceived to be a low or a very low income parcel, okay? And if you didn't build that, or if our zoning, speaking to having to update our zoning is nested, so you could build R1 density in R4. There's no minimum density in our nested classifications. Today, in order to qualify as a low or very low income parcel, you must be between a half acre and 10 acres in size. You must be able to demonstrate that there's utility, or that it's feasible to build on the site, and you must also be able to make a significant argument that construction of the site will happen, feasibly happen in the next 8 years over the course of the cycle. So the ability to demonstrate, those are the changes in state law that I'm talking about. It's not so easy as to say, I'm just going to do a quick GIS search and identify every parcel that has zero value on that land in terms of its built value versus its assessed value for the land. That's easy enough to do in a GIS. Find your vacant parcels just like that. It's not that way anymore. So right now, as we work hard on identifying parcels for our vacant sites inventory, I'm still looking for almost 300 acres of land for low and very low income. That's not to mention that those lands have to be zoned for no less than 30 dwelling units an acre. I've been talking for 2.5 years about we need to get denser, we need to provide for verticality. In order to qualify a parcel for a low or very low income, I must have a half acre to 10 acre parcel zoned for 30 units or more that I can anticipate development occurring on in the next 8 years, with utility nearby such that it's feasible that development could occur. That's not like it was in 2015. So when you're out there trying to assemble a vacant sites inventory, it's not like 2015. We are working hard to find those parcels where we have a GIS tool, a sites inventory tool, a site selection tool that's going to help us. We most certainly will have to entertain rezones of parcels. I'm actively engaged talking with property owners, where I might have 2 vacant sites right next to each other or 3 that cumulatively become a half acre. We want to talk to those people about perhaps you know, all zoning into a higher density scenario. There's a lot of footwork. I could spend my time right now just on this effort to find sufficient sites to meet 110 to 115%. It's a challenge. And I can see the benefit of it. There's more certainty from Sacramento that you have lands that can actually build the land, the units that we're being challenged to build in our regional housing need allocation. But at the same time, it's a challenge to put all those parcels together. I hope that answers your question.
I
Fully.
think that's the best answer I'm going to get right now, so thank you for doing that. You also mentioned the general plan and some items in the general plan that will assist you in meeting this compliance. When do you anticipate the general plan will be adopted?
General plan will be adopted sometime in the first quarter. Maybe it'll bleed into the second quarter of 2025. And we are on task, on schedule right now to do just that.
So will you take credit for these things that are going to be in the general plan in 2023? You're talking about being mostly compliant with this requirement in 2023.
That's why the city is going to be compelled to amend its residential zoning to provide for compatibility with HCD law. As I've noted, if you have an R1, R2, R3, R4 zoning matrix for residential, and you can build at an R1 density in an R4 zone, then HCD does not have a certainty that you will build at the density your vacant sites inventory is calling out. So if you're going to put something in an R4 zone and you're going to place it at 30 units an acre, you can't, that's the floor of that zone. Today, we have a floor of 17 units an acre up to 70. So we have to amend our zoning ordinance just to even be in a place where HCD would be in a position to adopt the housing element. Now, full disclosure, I could say, oh, we'll do that. We're going to do that. They could say, you got to do this and this and this and this. And I don't want to put the city, I don't think the city wants to be in a position where you're on the clock with HCD on something so fundamental as your ordinances. There may be, I'm certain there will be other benchmarks the city will have to aspire to coming out of the housing element update that HCD will say, in order for us to certify, these are the things you have to do. And so our intent is to not place the city in that position. We are working with our consultants to do a focused zoning update where necessary to our zoning code, so that we do have compliance with HCD, and most specifically within our vacant sites. If we're going to call out a parcel as being 30 units an acre, we have to provide to them a certainty that that's what we will build that to. So, yeah, I guess what I'm saying, Commissioner Coleman, is that there are many moving pieces today in the adoption of a housing element. We have an ordinance, a zoning ordinance is very old, and it doesn't speak to the contemporary ordinances that are being passed in Sacramento and have been getting passed in Sacramento since the housing crisis, as it is called, has come to bear. And so the city would much prefer to be part of the solution. I think I can say that for the city. The city would much prefer to be part of the solution and take proactive steps to have a fully compliant housing element and supportive zoning at time of adoption, as opposed to have HCD put us on a clock to get these things done. I just feel we're already on the clock.
The last question is regarding the local housing trust fund and how that's going to work, and how developers are going to know what's available to them and how they're going to be able to take advantage of those funds. Is that a subject for another presentation?
No, No, Commissioner Coleman, and I just want to thank you for coming prepared with many questions to just keep me on my toes. Look at that. Holy cow. Well, I can't answer to it, but I can't answer it as in-depth as the Economic Community Development Director may be able to. But that was originally perceived while the Economic Community Development Department was a section of Development Services. And when we wrote the SB2 grant, I was the department head for that division at that time. So we already have an Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We have funded it for some time now. We do have some, if I'm talking with Mr. Saldana, there are some formulative documents that must be put into place. Nod, yes, Vidi, no? I think there are some formulative, more formal documents that the state wishes to have in order to say, I have an Affordable Housing Trust Fund. But we largely are doing just that right now. We dedicate dollars into that trust fund annually. I think the question came from the dais last night, and I think the math was we've dedicated $7.4 million into that trust fund since its inception. It's been a couple of years. Individuals can apply for funding. We release a notice of funds availability, a NOFA. Individuals can come to the city and propose a project and ask for funding for that project through that fund. And those funds are ultimately awarded annually for projects that merit investment on the part of the city in support of those projects. You could call it gap funding, closing the gap to make those projects affordable so they come out of the ground. And there are a lot of those projects that are coming out of the ground right now. So, but I do believe that there's some legal components to that process that need to be implemented in order for it to be, fully vetted as an affordable housing trust fund. That you have to establish the trust fund in some legal formative way. And I don't think the city has done that yet, but perhaps Paul's going way faster than I know he is. So, Director Saldana.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Coleman. Commissioner Neal.
Hi, nice to meet you, Mr. Boyle. I'm going to ask you some questions, not because I'm trying to keep you on your toes, but just because I'm trying to be educated. I'm the newest commissioner, and some of it is about what you covered in your presentation, and some of it is kind of tangential to comments that were made. My very first question, considering the property values and costs right now, extremely elevated, the current interest rates for purchasing homes extremely elevated, and I'm just wondering if there's any element of our affordable housing program or fund that is available to assist, and I don't know if we have this or not, assist people in our city that want to own in our city but can't afford it because it's entirely too expensive or the interest rates are entirely too high. Some type of down payment assistance or low interest loan, is that built into our affordable housing program somewhere? And where would that fit? Would that be in the fund?
Well, first, the down payment assistance programs and the like, the city had robust programs along those lines back when we had a redevelopment agency, but that was disbanded in 2012. There's much dialogue about some of the programs that you described being reintroduced into the city's bailiwick of tools, but I do not believe those programs are stood up right now.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
I know that they're being spoken of.
Thank you for that, because I think we tend to focus the conversation of affordable housing on renters, people that will pay someone else to own the dwelling that they live in. But we have a lot of hardworking people here in Kern County that just don't earn enough money to pay these high home prices or to pay these high interest rates. And I'm just wondering if there can be more done for the people that are already here that want to own and not just rent. If there's somewhere we can, how that will be readdressed or reinserted into our plan. So,
I appreciate your comments. I wish I could add more to the dialogue.
I had some more questions. Well, that was a comment. I had some more questions. Sorry for taking your time, commissioners, but this is an important issue to me. You said you gave a presentation back in March 2022. How can I get a copy of that?
And that is available on YouTube if you do a
YouTube.
search for that. Yes.
Okay. Awesome. It was recorded.
I'll be at the end, and it's the best part.
Okay. You said that in the last 5 years, there were a lot of laws coming out of Sacramento that were not necessarily compliant with here in Bakersfield. And I'm just wondering, if you could speak to the really, I guess, big issue ones that you know offhand that we're not compliant with.
Well, I gave a presentation on SB 9 and SB 10. That was my last visit to you all. Now, SB 9 is a lot split program, which would provide for the ability of homeowners to split their lots and then put 2 units on each of those lots. The city hasn't taken any action either for or against that. Many of the cities that have adopted 6-cycle housing elements, they have taken the time to adopt an ordinance that provides a local pathway towards being fully compliant with SB 9, SB 10. The city hasn't moved forward with any. Usually SB 10 is applied as sort of an overlay zone where the city could apply. If you might recall, the SB 10 would be the 10 units a parcel, not 10 units an acre overlay zone. That was also passed as part of SB 10. Those are just 2 that I brought to you recently. There are many. I mean, when you look at, let's short list. Many of them are mentioned in these conditions of these potential point categories. You've got objective versus subjective housing. You've got inclusionary housing, you've got affirmatively furthering fair housing, you've got, boy, that's just some off the top of my head. I don't dare volunteer to do a presentation on all the housing law because it would be way too long, Commissioner Neal.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of pieces of ordinance that a city must contemplate.
Yeah.
Some of those ordinances the city may want to codify. Some of them they may not.
Thank you for that. That definitely gives me some pointers on where to look.
If I may, Commissioner Neal, that SB 9, SB 10 workshop was on January 20th of this year.
Okay. Thank you for that. You mentioned several times that we need an updated zoning ordinance. And my question is, do you know what the holdup is?
I don't necessarily feel like there is a holdup. I don't know if I'd use that term.
Mm-hmm.
I think the city has an ordinance that has served it well for an extended period of time. And if not for new state law, I think that it could continue to serve the city for a long period of time. It's going to have to be adapted and adjusted to state law so that we're compliant with that law. And then the city will move forward and capitalize on its new ordinance in new ways. It is an older ordinance, so it's adopted. I think, what's the last time it was fully gone through, Paul? I think it's safe to say the last time it was fully vetted out is probably in the 80s. So a lot has happened since 1980. If you think about the population of the city in 1980, we weren't, I think we're a little over 100,000 in 1970, so probably in the 150 range. So about a third the size we are today. And so here the city is at a cusp where it is certainly grown from being the town it was, and it wants to protect that character, and we do that partially through zoning. But at the same time, we need to acknowledge the fact that we are now a town of 400,000 plus, and it's within reason that within our upcoming general plan cycle, we could be a town of 700,000 plus. And the zoning ordinance is how you implement your general plan. It is how you take those goals and policies of the general plan and implement it on a day-to-day basis, on a parcel by parcel basis. And so all of the formative pieces of land use planning that Mr. Johnson is tasked with implementing largely are faced with being updated as a living, dynamic component of doing all the things we're doing all at one time. We are so fortunate to be in the middle of a municipal services review and a climate action plan, and looking at our habitat conservation plan and updating that, and our sixth cycle housing element, and our general plan, comprehensive general plan update, that it only stands to reason that we will have to take our zoning ordinance and make it contemporary and compatible with those guiding documents.
Thank you for that. I just beg to differ. I was born in the 80s. And so if we haven't had a change to our zoning ordinance since the 80s, there is a holdup. And you talked about it. You kind of mentioned it a little bit in saying that we're kind of used to the town character and want to protect that, but that's not who we are anymore, and we haven't been that for a very long time in this city. So I don't know if I haven't been involved until now. All I know is I left for college and university and grad school and came back, and there's just tons of new schools and new development everywhere. We're growing like wildfire, so I can't understand why we wouldn't have by now, since the 80s, addressed our zoning ordinance. So to me, that sounds like a holdup, but we may just disagree on rhetoric on that issue. Okay, well, thank you for that. So you're anticipating that the zoning ordinance will be updated ahead of the general plan update, which is supposed to come in 2025, right?
Let me provide specificity too. In that the housing element is relative to residential zoning. The zoning that we're proposing would be focused on the residential segment of our zoning code. I would note, though, that a council member provided a referral to the Planning and Development Committee that asked to look at the use schedules of the industrial zones at the same time. So I would note that there's many eyes on the needed improvements to the various segments of our ordinance, and we'll be responsive to those as directed.
I think I had one more question. I think that's it for me. Thank you so much, Mr. Boyle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Neal. Commissioner Lomas, do you have any comments? Or? Okay, I have many, and so I am sorry, Commissioner Lomas.
Not a word, Commissioner Lomas? I like you.
Her only word was nope. Let the record show. No, I appreciate the other commissioners' comments, and I think just a couple of questions. I think, well, first I just want to start out by saying I think it's very appropriate and inspiring to me as a city that Sacramento was the first city to meet the state's objectives, because Sacramento is not San Francisco. It is not a dense metropolis that is consistent primarily of multi-story high-rise buildings. It is a city that has residential neighborhoods. It is a city that has a downtown core and everything in between. And to me, that's inspiring because I think as a community, I think there was a term that was peppered into the presentation called the missing middle. And I think that so much of this conversation is about providing accessible, realistically funded, realistically constructed density within communities like ours. We are not asking everybody to become the financial district of San Francisco in the next 10 years. And I think, for me, that's inspiring because it's also a city. Sacramento is not West Los Angeles. It's not Palo Alto. It is a city that has needs. It has diverse incomes. It is not. So to me, there's an inspiration in that we're not asking to get to a goal that is based purely on these cities that have always been powerhouses or always had a history of density. It's a very attainable model, I think. Looking in that, I am somewhat of a planning nerd, so having studied the zoning map of Sacramento, I do think, to me, that city has done a great job of creating a recognition that density doesn't just happen. You don't leave a financial district and go right into estate houses. That there is this transition. Major boulevards leading to residential neighborhoods are allowed to be 3 to 4 stories. And they're allowed to have duplexes behind those 3 to 4 story building. And where there's transit corridors, parking standards are less because people have accessible, realistic routes. And I think we as a city traditionally, and it might be because, to echo Commissioner Neal, the zoning practices we use were invented before I was born. And so that nuance and that full range of opportunity, I don't think is fully present in how we see things. And so I just think, so my first question is, we always talk about the housing goals and the number of units we're supposed to provide in, I believe, 10 years?
8.
8 years, okay. And that clock, did it begin this year or it began a couple of years ago, right?
Well, the 6th cycle is, thank you for your question, Chair.
Yes.
The 6th cycle is from 2023 to 2031. So actually, we can count, but we're reporting on it in 2024. The first annual report will be in 2024. So you can count all development from July 1, 2023 towards this 6th cycle.
Okay, thank you. Because to me, that means that planning to have all of our issues addressed at a high level in 2025 to then move into implementation after that sounds like that's not really the timeline we need to solve these issues and meet those numbers. Because by then we will have been reporting for 2 years, and if we're behind on those 2 years, we have to make it up in the last, and so to me, I would just, in the urgency of it, and I'm glad to hear on council referrals for looking at how we can prepare ourselves to succeed rather than explain to why we didn't succeed. And I think that's great to hear. So, but I think, just encouraging that the timeline seems more immediate than a general plan update.
I would note that the housing element timeline is dictated by law.
Yep.
So our general plan update, which is a longer effort, is updating an element of the general plan through the housing element update. And I think they're about as close as an efforts could be realistically, in that this one is selected by the city in terms of about every 20 years.
Okay. And the housing element's required to be updated how often? It's
Every 8 years.
8 years, right? Yeah, okay. Great. Sorry, I wrote a lot of scribbles. My apologies. Yeah, and then I just think, and I appreciate the presentation, but I do think one thing as a city that I would encourage is it seems like there's a lot of requirements coming from Sacramento, and I think there's equally a lot of incentives. And I get concerned a little bit when the tone and tenor is purely based on this is what Sacramento is making us do versus here how we can compete as a jurisdiction to go after the funding that's available. And so I'd be curious, because my next question is really, we are a community that market rate housing is more affordable relative to many other communities in California. So from the market rate component, I feel like there's some density, there's this, but the affordable component, how much affordable housing is state or public funded versus private funded, would you say, on percentage?
I can't answer that question precisely.
Okay. Loosely,
the economics and the business model of building market rate housing versus affordable housing is very, very different. There are many different pots of money that are assembled to build a deed-restricted affordable housing project. And so the entire financial matrix is entirely different.
But it typically involves going after grants and funding and public funding. Is that correct, usually in affordable housing?
Yes, and there is a certain investor segment that also participates in affordable housing projects in terms of long-term investments. Yes.
But it's typically a part and a part that makes the funding happen, right?
Or part and part and part
And part, correct.
Many colors in the pot, money in the pot.
Yeah, and so I would commend, I think the city of Bakersfield over the last couple of years has become a lot more aggressive, I think, in going after funding, especially grants. And I think, but I think, looking at tonight's presentation and the benefits of being pro-housing and getting kind of seen in a more favorable light as we go after these grants, to me seems like a necessary element to succeed when half of our new housing needs to be affordable, and little to none of that is coming from a true market delivery method. And so I would just, I think, as these opportunities come, I just think the city being on the forefront and trying to, come to the table when it comes to those just seems essential to meeting our housing goals. And then I think that was it. And then I guess the other aspect, I do think I appreciate Commissioner Neal's comment on ownership, because I've been very fascinated in some of the minimum lot size and some of the other issues surrounding single-family home ownership. I was reading about a program in Los Angeles where lot size was reduced in certain communities to 500 square feet, so that you could have a fee simple structure of ownership on, effectively a townhome, which allows for more density, but still it doesn't require the complications of a co-op board or a tenancy in common or a forever renter. And is the city looking at anything like that makes fee simple ownership structures of denser projects a little bit more attainable?
I would say that your body will be seeing projects that are much more dense in the not too distant future. And I'll leave it at that. We've worked hard in the last 2.5 years in encouraging a denser urban form. We've worked hard in encouraging smaller lot sizes to our development community. And to a degree, we're hopeful that the community begins to embrace it and it's successful.
Great. Well, I look forward to seeing those. And I really appreciate your presentation. Please don't take our jesting about the empty room as anything but jesting. I appreciate your presentation.
This is my chance for a little humor.
Okay.
Thanks for your comments, Commissioner.
Sure. Thank you.
Chair.
Seeing no other commissioner comments, I will just say thank you once again for your presentation. And Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Agenda item number 8, communications.
Commissioner, or not Commissioner, unless you want to join us. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you. Due to the number of weeks in this month, our next meeting is in 3 weeks. It is July 7th. Right now, it's a fairly light agenda, so it shouldn't go much more than an hour and a half.
Thank you. We are here to serve, and as long as it may take. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Agenda item 9, commission comments.
Does any commissioner have any comments?
I just want to thank the other commissioners for the good questions, and Mr. Boyle for being so kind to answer he's gone, all of our questions.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
He's hiding.
that's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Neal. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Agenda item 10, adjournment.
This meeting is adjourned at 6:34. Have a great evening. Thank you. Bye.
you.